Good afternoon, Americans. This is your favorite alien speaking on Tuesday, July 11th, with my friend Bubba. We're looking at the afternoon, and today I'm sitting in for Paul Harvey. Stay tuned for the rest of the story. Well, here was Joe, a 21-year-old, lanky, about 6'6", very big boned guy, farmer by trade. His family owned a farm in Burtonsville, Maryland. It's April 1941, and farming's not for him, so he goes into the local Army recruiters and enlists himself in the U.S. Army. His dad did not approve, although he was an Army doctor back in World War I. And Joe, being 21 at the time, he goes into his boot camp and everything there. One of his brothers is already in another service, the Navy. His other brother will go in later. In December, 1941, Pearl Harbor, which really precipitated things, and he gets sent to Panama, where in 1943 he meets this Navy radio man named Albert Wingenfield. Everybody called him Wingy. And Joe, he forms a good relationship, even though Wingy is 7 years older than he is. So that was an interesting friendship that lasts over 50 years. Well, the war ends in 1945. Joe decides to stay, because you got to remember the times, and the family, Burtonsville, Maryland, was basically they believed in the Confederacy and the Southern way of doing things. So therefore, Joe was a little bit on by today's standards, you would call him racist, but I didn't. I wouldn't call him racist. And Wingy was from Ohio. Kind of combination, Maryland and Ohio, huh? Well, they two strung romances with two sisters. Joe gets married in 45, adopts a 8-year-old son, calls him Joe Jr., but he's known as Frank because his first name was Francisco, but when they adopted him, he became Joseph Francisco, or Frank. So he becomes known as Frank. They live in the Canal Zone, which, you gotta remember the times, late 40s, 50s, was very segregated. They believed in Gold Road and Silver Road and all kinds of stuff there. So, being that he was married, Rosa, his wife, was in the Silver Road, so she always shopped in the high-level areas. Anyway, in 1951, they decided that they didn't want to live in the Canal Zone, too restrictive. So they wanted to move outside in a little town in the west part of Panama. So they did. It was, in order to get to work though, it was cumbersome because there was no bridge, and he had to go to the Canal Zone to work. He worked in the locks division, and the Peter Mike's locks, or Pedro Miguel locks. So, well, long story short, he had to take the ferry every day from 1956 to 62 when they finally built the Bridge of the Americas, the Thatcher Bridge as they call it down there, but it's known as the Bridge of the Americas to everybody else. Anyway, Joe lived a nice, comfortable life there, except that his son Frank always messed it up, and eventually it cost him his job. he had to retire early in '74 because his son did some shenanigans, and they think that he did it. To this day, the government of the United States is bad, but nobody has any proof to count him otherwise except for someone. Well, Joe lived comfortably till his death in 2004, which was, he died of neglect. He would have died anyway because he had all kinds of issues. He had mesothelioma, uh, lung cancer, and melanoma, all kinds of stuff. But he would have died anyway. But he died of neglect because of his son. And Rosa, she lived another 4 years. Wiggy, he died in 2000. And Maxie, his wife, died in 2010. But I can tell you they weren't. Joe and Rosa weren't exactly perfect. They had their faults. Their families had their faults in Maryland because they didn't treat her right till the late 1990s when they accounted for it. But be that as it may, they had their faults, and Joe deserved a better funeral than he got. Rosa deserved a better funeral than they got. The rest of the story is when your country doesn't care about you, boy, and you are very much a country person, because he was a country person, United States to the core, even though he was a Panahuchi, as he called himself. I wanted to dedicate this rest of the story to Joe. And this is your favorite alien sitting in for Paul Harvey saying, that was my grandfather. Good day.